Jimmy Kimmel said nothing wrong about MAGA. This is Toronto Stevie Live Political Desk talking about the big story that happened this week. Jimmy Kimmel, who has his own daily show on ABC late night, was suspended indefinitely for comments he made on his Monday show, which brought me to look at what exactly did Jimmy Kimmel say. Keep my glasses here. And so I will quote verbatim what he said. Quote, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this." And then he cuts to a video of an interview with the president taking questions. And one of the reporters asked, "May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?" And Trump responds, "Oh, I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all those trucks. They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years, and it's going to be a beauty." And so then the video ends, and Kimmel is back on screen, and he says, "Yes, he's at the fourth stage of grief, construction, demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish, okay?" And that's the quote, that's end quote. And that's what apparently got Kimmel in a lot of trouble. The only thing is, what he said is absolutely correct. On Wednesday, September the 10th, Charlie Kirk was murdered. And almost immediately, before anyone even knew who did it, the MAGA crowd got on their soapbox and started throwing out the usual tropes, the usual talking points, basically throwing anything like left-wing radicals or, all kinds of smears at the left before they even knew anything. And even like 33 hours later, after Tyler Robinson's father turned him in to the police, and before we actually knew anything at all about him, the MAGA crowd was still bending over backwards saying Tyler Robinson was a left-wing radical. He was this, he was that. But eventually we found out, well, oh yes, and they tried to blame, he was indoctrinated at university, except that he was there for like one semester and left before going to a trade school. And then, so I don't think that indoctrination argument flew. And so then they found out, he had a transgender partner. He was living with a transgender partner. And then the picture got a little bit clearer. That no, this 22-year-old who had very limited life experience, no, he probably wasn't some radicalized member of some group. It turns out he had this perceived in his own mind, a perceived grievance with Charlie Kirk over Kirk's very controversial opinions about transgenders, as his partner was a transgender. And so possibly that's a possible motive that's come since the murder last week. But then Um, so this was Monday. So Jimmy Kimmel was commenting. That's why he said over the weekend, basically a period of time when we didn't know anything about Tyler Robinson, when all this information came out. Before that, Kimmel accurately describes how the MAGA reaction was. This is exactly what they were, bending over backwards, trying to basically say this guy wasn't a MAGA, because as they found out right away, one of the early things they did find out about him was that Tyler Robinson's parents, I guess, were Republicans. Don't know if they were MAGA or not, quite frankly. Maybe I think someone did say they voted for Donald Trump, but even, not everyone who voted for Donald Trump is MAGA, not every MAGA, So they may or may not have been, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. But they found out that his parents voted for Donald Trump, even though Tyler Robinson did not, apparently. So, so Jimmy Kimmel basically, there's a backlash immediately, and the MAGA crowd and all their supporters and the right-wing media, particularly in the United States and even here in Canada, I think, erroneously, incorrectly, basically saying, "Oh, did you hear Jimmy condemning Jimmy Kimmel's comments about Charlie Kirk?" And this is exactly what I heard. You can look it up. But the thing is, his comments had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk. He wasn't commenting on Charlie Kirk. He wasn't commenting at all about him at all. He was commenting on the immediate reaction by MAGA, by some Republican politicians and right-wing supporters of President Trump. And I thought, yes, people are saying, you're going to hear a lot of arguments on the left, basically saying, "Well, this is a free speech argument." Well, I don't know about that, because I want to thank again Chris Cuomo. I know a lot of people probably don't like him, but his podcast went into great detail about exactly what this situation is actually about. So I thought one other thing I wanted to look into. First Amendment. The First Amendment is a part of the U.S. Constitution Bill of Rights that prohibits the government from making laws to restrict certain fundamental freedoms. It protects the right to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, including the right to practice, and the prohibition of state-sponsored religion, freedom of assembly, and the right to petition the government. These freedoms ensure that individuals can express themselves, share information, worship without government interference, gather peacefully, and ask the government for changes or to address the wrongs. And Chris Cuomo correctly pointed this out on his show. The First Amendment is about prohibiting the government from acting against the rights of the citizens. It is, and you're seeing right now that Donald Trump, I think it was today or maybe it was yesterday, in which he said something ridiculous like 97% of the stories written about him were negative, and he felt that was illegal. No. The First Amendment prohibits the government from infringing on these freedoms, and that includes the press are free to criticize you, to write stories about you. There is absolutely nothing illegal about it. Now, one thing I did want to comment on, and I want to again say, this is the latest in a series of. There have been a lot of people that have been basically kicked off their shows basically because of their views. I mean, there was Bill Maher, there was Jesse Ventura, there was Bill Donahue, Keith Olbermann, Stephen Colbert is going to be kicked off, and now Jimmy Kimmel. All of these people, you'll notice that the government, the Trump administration, is not going after Kimmel directly. No, instead, you have the government going after the employer. The same thing with Stephen Colbert and CBS. And because Trump had a problem with those 60 Minutes interviews, and he sued 60 Minutes at CBS. And they went after ABC, Disney, the owners of ABC, and basically like the FCC chairman, the FCC chairman going after ABC as well. What's his name? Carr. It was Ted Cruz comparing the FCC chair to a mafia boss. What was this guy's name? Brendan Carr. So like, and basically almost threatening ABC that with punitive action if they didn't do their dirty work for them. He was suspended. They're suspending Kimmel immediately, indefinitely. But keep in mind, Jimmy Kimmel has been suspended, but he hasn't been fired yet. So technically, he's still an ABC employee. And as far as I know, and I want to credit Keith Olbermann for talking about this on his show, Jimmy Kimmel is currently under contract to ABC. He's probably making a good chunk of change, even if his show is not put on the air, as Olbermann was saying, because he said the same thing happened to him. And I suspect the same thing probably happened to Bill Maher and Phil Donahue and Jesse Ventura. Even though their shows were taken off the air, they probably had contracts that paid them handsomely. Jesse admitted this, that when he was fired from his show, that he went away, cashed the paychecks, and didn't say anything, and lived up to his contract, didn't breach his contract, and he got paid. And I suspect that Jimmy Kimmel is cashing a paycheck right now, even if his show is not on the air. So but it is disturbing. It's not a free speech. I mean, the Trump administration isn't they're not taking action against anybody yet. I understand it now. They're going to target The View because they've The View is very anti-Trump, and it wouldn't surprise me if they went after him or Seth Meyers or Jimmy Fallon, all these talk shows that are critical of him, because in Donald Trump's warped mind, criticism of him is like hate speech or it's illegal. But no, it's not. It's not. And if they do try and go after them, you do need some of these personalities or some of these employers to finally step up and push back against this kind of behavior, which is unacceptable. And I know this is all happening in the United States, but it's surprising that even people on this side of the border in Canada, particularly the right wing, I'm no fan of the right wing in Canada, but at least they're not as out of their friggin' minds as the American right wing. But they still, a lot of times they talk about, Jimmy Kimmel's, his ratings were bad. And to an extent, yeah, that's true. You're talking about late night, and you're talking about in an era of streaming and people getting their fix of television off, you see places like YouTube and Netflix and Amazon Prime, Hulu, no longer are people, I'm not even turning on a television to watch stuff anymore. I'm basically watching stuff on these networks, online and streaming services. So like, yeah, the audiences have definitely shrunk, and they probably are a lost leader. Um, so like, it's not surprising that uh, these shows are probably losing money. I mean, gone are the days of Johnny Carson making money, being a money winner for NBC. But like, but still, I think it has been a mistake. um, I think Jimmy Kimmel's comments have been greatly misunderstood. Uh, his comments were specifically about MAGA voices immediately after Charlie Kirk got murdered. And it was a setup. By the way, those comments were a setup for a joke about Trump. Basically, the fourth stage of grief, construction. And it's as I'm watching this, I'm also want to bring your attention to something another thing that I heard Donald Trump say earlier. So he said something, I think he was on a Fox show, and he was asked about mending the political divide. Somebody asked him a question about what, Mr. President, what could you do to like turn down the temperature? It was on Fox and Friends. So he asked, was it Ainsley Earnhardt? So she asked Donald Trump, how do you fix this country? How do we come back together? And Donald Trump almost immediately says, I couldn't care less. Right. And so what you basically saw was Donald Trump in a moment basically showing his true colors, telling the truth. Donald Trump, for once in his life, told the truth when asked about what he could do to turn down the temperature in this country in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder. His response, I couldn't care less. That says a lot about him, I'll tell you that. So like, and now should we get to the controversial thing that I'm going to say in this video? I think that extends to Charlie Kirk's murder. I think Trump couldn't care less about Charlie Kirk or his murder. And why do I say that? Because Donald Trump is a sociopath and he's incapable of empathy. And I think, like I said, and an example of that was like, Mr. President, how are you holding up after the murder? Oh, look at the construction of the ballroom. Like, I think what you're seeing is the Trump administration using Charlie Kirk's murder for political advantage. They're trying to find political advantage that they can hold over their political enemies, like canceling out the press and comedians and anyone who criticizes them. This is exactly what's going on. Any public shows of sympathy for Charlie Kirk's family are purely performative. And there was one other thing that, maybe the last thing that I will mention, that I think what you've seen so far and what you're going to see in the future is, among people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, Pam Bondi, and maybe others, there are two words that you are never going to hear come out of their mouths. And I haven't heard these two words yet, and I'm not exactly sure I'm going to hear these two words come out of their mouths in the future. And those two words are Tyler Robinson. And why is it that you think that they're not going to specifically mention the name of the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk? Because it's an agenda. Instead, there was an interview that Pam Bondi gave in which, and I think J.D. Vance said this, and I'm not sure, Donald Trump may not have said this directly, but I know that J.D. Vance has, Pam Bondi has, when referencing this murder, they've said they killed Charlie Kirk. Pam Bondi specifically said they, when referring to Charlie Kirk's murderer, though they killed Charlie Kirk. This is, in my opinion, this is deliberate, specifically targeting, saying the left, to stoke, basically talk about fomenting hatred in America. When you say they instead of Tyler Robinson, that is exactly what you're doing, Ms. Bondi. You are stoking hatred in America, and that's wrong. And that is irresponsible of you as the Attorney General of the United States to do that. So keep that in mind. Remember this. This is who they are. I've heard that phrase said about the Trump administration, and it's true. This is who they are. They are people who are taking full political advantage of someone's murder for their gain, for their own interests, because that is who they are. And so those are my comments on something I wanted to touch on. There is more, another point I wanted to make, but at this time, I've been going on for too long. So I'll just say, Toronto Stevie Live Political Desk. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I will continue to grow my channel. Thank you very much, and good night.